Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Rodcast. Today, we are talking about online and in person church services. The world has changed recently, and we are exploring a whole new expression of church through online services. And so, we're going to be talking about that today. So, Pastor Rod, I just wanted to ask you, this whole online expression of church and in person working along with that, how do you see us using both expressions of church to reach people for Jesus?
Well, when COVID started, I think all of us were at different places. Some had done online, some had done none, and it really did accelerate everyone's interest with online. So the question is, did it work? I think we can really dive into that a lot more, but my answer is yes. But I think it's got to be excellent, and so we could talk about that. What is excellent? Because excellence doesn't mean $1 million worth of equipment, but it does mean something that meets your congregants and future congregants. In other words, people around the world. So yeah, it's got to be good. In person has also got to be good in its own way, and together, I think that's the hybrid model. The way of the future is 100% online and 100% in person.
Great. Yeah, I mean, we're very excited about these two expressions of church and how they outwork and work together. But maybe we should back up a little bit because with online being so new, um, I think we need to talk about how does church actually look like on this platform, and is this biblical? Like, what are some of the
Mm.
objections we might hear around online church, and maybe the theology behind our thinking of why we do feel this is valid and an important expression of church moving forwards?
You got a
Big
few
question.
hours there. We don't, but it's like whoa. We're going to enter into things like church history, church experience, some Bible verses. There is so much to really travel here. But what I want to say is, all through history, since the beginning of the church, the book of Acts, chapter 2, the local church has looked different. It's looked different as regarding its context, whether the countries were free or closed, whether they were in wartime or peacetime. It's so many parts to that puzzle. And then 100 years ago, maybe I don't know my timing there was the beginning of radio, and all of a sudden you could actually do radio programs into many parts of the world we couldn't do before. And then the world moved into TV, and some people could do TV, and many could not. And when we hit online, we realized we could all do a form of expression online. So I think all through history, context tells us that we need to find a way to do church, because the church is the people of God meeting together. And some people will say, well, that means we've got to be in the same room. And I think we can all agree that that historically has not been the case. I mean, even when Paul wrote his letters to churches in a different country, even a different continent, when he's writing into Rome, or that they were hand delivered by a person to people who 92% couldn't read. Someone had to read it out, and then that's their context. Their context was they had to get a part of the Bible and then use it and memorize it and pass it on if they could. And in other words, they did with what they had. They had to do what they had to do. So with COVID, I think we had to do what we had to do, and some of it has been gold, just absolutely amazing. So context is really important, but I believe that the local church is where people meet with God. Jesus said it very clearly: where two or three meet in my name, there I am in the midst. Now, we either believe that or we don't, and I believe it, and I know most of our listeners will believe that. So a group of two could be a church. In fact, in some countries of the world where there's a war, it is a church. You can't get more than that in your little home or under the ground or wherever you're meeting. But this has always been the case from the time of the early church, where people were persecuted for hundreds of years, from the birth of the church in, let's say, 33 AD until 300 something AD. the Roman Empire, there was absolute persecution of the church, and many times people had to hide and be together in a little cluster, which could have been a family, it could have been a couple, it could have been two friends meeting in a park. But that is a church. Now it's a small church, and you want churches to grow, but context tells us we've got to go with what we got. And so, what am I saying? The local church is about people meeting with God. Now, there's another factor that we discovered over this last 2 years or 2.5 years, and that is that even one person can meet with another person on Zoom and have church. And I think it's another whole level or another whole moment, maybe not level, but a moment in history where we need to discover that that's valid also. That some people are stuck in their homes. There was quarantines. There was in one country, if you went outside, you would be shot because of the COVID quarantine. That was for a short season in the Philippines. And what are people going to do? They're not going to say, well, we've got to be together and go out and risk being shot. They're going to go on Zoom and they're going to have a valid experience together. So the context makes us look at how do we do it, which is, I guess, a coming discussion here. But I don't think this is unique in history, is what I'm saying. I think some people have seen the online as a unique moment. What I'm saying is historically that's incorrect. You know, some people have hidden in caves for a season of their life, and that alone, and that had to be church too, because there was no other way they could meet with another believer. So that's a huge way of answering the question up front. But I believe the church is where people meet with God, preferably two or more. But there have been times where even one and God had to be the church in their context. Um, and I think that what we need to ask then is, well, what does the church do? You're probably going to ask that question. But let me just share a couple of scriptures that talk about even the beginning of the church. There was two expressions. There was the temple expression of church, and there was the house expression, the house church and the big church. So in Acts chapter 2, verse 46, it says, every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. That would have been thousands of people. At the end of chapter 2, we know there was thousands in the church. And from house to house. Now, even here in Japan, we cannot meet house to house usually, because the people who are believing in Jesus are living with their parents who are not believers. We can't meet in their houses. So right from the beginning here in Japan, we had to meet in Starbucks or in the park. So straight away, let me say, house to house doesn't mean literal house. It means small groups, wherever they find them. Might be at a workplace, might be in the park, might be by a river. But the two expressions here are all of a sudden at the end of Acts chapter 2 is revealed as the church. And people might say, well, we like the temple expression. And I say, well, yeah, me too. But it's not always possible. This same phrase appears in Acts chapter 5. And it appears that there was meeting in the temple courts and house to house the second time. And the third time is an easy one to remember. It's Acts 20:20. Acts 20:20, where Paul is writing to the Ephesian elders. And 2020 is also this little saying for insight. I have 2020 vision, so it's quite an interesting scripture. Acts 20:20. That I have not hesitated to preach anything that would be helpful to you, but have taught you publicly and from house to house. So 3 times in the book of Acts, it delineates the temple meeting and the house church meeting as valid. And all through history, there's been the big meeting and the little meeting, and hopefully both at the same time. But in persecution, you can't do the big church meeting. So during COVID and during quarantine, you couldn't do the big church meeting. So what do? We go to the small church, and now added online and Zoom and different platforms, which we're not going to talk about, but all that stuff. So I don't know if I answered your question there, because it's a big question.
Yeah.
But the church is a bigger expression than just a Sunday meeting, isn't it?
hmm It seems like if I can summarize maybe a little bit, is that the church has always adapted throughout history. Like, that's not new. Maybe what's new is the technology or the way that it's happening, but the church has always adapted and will always need to adapt. Um,
I think if the Apostle Paul was alive today, 2,000 years later, we wouldn't have all those New Testament letters. He would have used, first of all, Twitter and then YouTube and Instagram and Zoom, and he would have had an absolute blast. He would have had he would be the Zoom guy. He would be the online guy. And what about in-person meetings? Yeah, he's not going to stop that either. But he didn't have any of that technology, so they used letter writing, which was so slow. It was so slow, and that's why most letters are longer, because they had to be written and then delivered to other churches, and that was the only technology they had back then. But in Paul's day, under the Roman Empire, they had what they called the Pax Romana, or the Roman peace, by which the Roman army and navy got rid of pirates and got rid of bandits and allowed people to move for the first time in many centuries. And so the technology included sea traffic, road traffic, letter writing. There was a post service under the Romans, and so in Paul's day, he used all of that. We know he did, and yes, I think Paul today would have used modern technology. Um, so I think the New Testament, being written in its context, used all the technology of their day, and that's pretty interesting, isn't it?
right. So he was actually maximizing technology to the extent that he could in his timing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's incredible to see that. In fact, he was a tent maker by trade. Actually, that word could be also sail maker, so it could be involved with the sea industry. And he would have understood ships absolutely, being from Tarsus in the bottom of what we call Turkey today, a seaport. He was a man who understood the Bible, but really understood industry, technology, languages. He was God's chosen to take the gospel to the Gentiles, which was, it says a number of times, God had chosen him to take it outside Israel to the Gentiles. He was uniquely gifted to understand technology, to understand transportation, to understand the postal system. Yes, he used all of those structures to share the gospel.
I feel like there's almost a challenge there, like to the church, like how much can you leverage today's technology or whatever to be able to reach people?
Totally.
That the
Yep.
church should be adapting with to the current times and how we reach people.
Well, I know you and I, Rich, and many of our leaders have said it's amazing the pandemic came in 2020, that we had this technology, that 20 years earlier, although we had the internet, we didn't have this technology. It was, there's no perfect time for a pandemic. That's not what I'm saying. But it did come in the perfect time for technology, and for us to, all of us, to be able to pick up a phone and talk to people and transmit something to someone in another country or across the city, and to have fellowship and to have to read the Bible together and to pray together and take communion together, and all of it online. The timing has been really amazing, hasn't
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing. It wouldn't have worked any other time.
it? And
It's
if we remember before 20 years ago, there was dial up. I don't know if you remember that at your age,
yeah.
but there was
No, I remember.
and there, that noise of
Horrible.
the dial up, and often it said, the spinning wheel of death that never, you never landed. It never connected. And to have this level of connectivity, we've got great mics and great cameras, and it's just amazing for us to explore how we can share the gospel with our own people and with people outside the knowledge of Jesus Christ.
Mhm. And this technology has allowed us to go places that we could never go to. I mean, into
Absolutely.
people's homes
Yeah.
who are not even comfortable leaving their own home.
Yeah. And here in Japan, we have 2 million people they call locked in. That the word is hikikomori in Japan. It means locked in people that don't go outside their home. 2 million young people, very hurt by the world and by their experience, and we can actually reach them because they're always on the internet. So that's a new people group right there, and we finding new people groups in certain countries, even in wartime countries. We're actually able to start new campuses, new churches. It's
Mm.
amazing.
I think also, if you look at where people spend their time, we'd probably say we all spend too much time, on our phones and with our heads down, and we're living in an online world. We're,
Yeah.
we're we're walking through that every day, and to not have the church there is a big miss. So
Yeah, yesterday, Masashi, who's our campus pastor in Yokohama and also our youth pastor, said a study came out about where young people are happy. Let me back up a little. There's every year there's a happiness study around the world, every country, and Japan's always been low, like number 150 or something, like ridiculous. And you think, how can a wealthy country be so low? It's because people are lonely. And so this study also said, well, where's your happy place? And the number one answer was while they're on the internet, while they're on social media, while they're on Instagram or YouTube. And so yes, they've got their phone and their heads are down, and they're calling that their happy place. Now we would like to invite them into a bigger world of relationships, of course, but we can use leverage that interest and that happy place to put happy stuff out there, whether it's TikTok or um, whatever we use. Let's put some stuff out there. In fact, some of our most popular stuff in Japan for evangelism has been some silly stuff. I don't mean we make fun of God, but it just, someone saying something and getting a word wrong, people laughing, because in Japan, they said they were so tired of bad news. People were so tired of bad blogs or something bad, someone saying something bad and someone reacting. So there's actually a reaction. People are saying, show me something happy because I'm going to use my phone. I want to be happy. So show me something happy. So again, we're seeing that how the world has changed. The youth world has changed and is changing. And again, we need to be in technology to reach that world. Hey,
yeah, I think there's definitely a stronger awareness that social media can make you very unhappy. Like there seems to be a lot more people talking about that, doctors and
yeah,
uh, educated people, and I think there's been some experience now.
yeah. And I'm not saying it is the source of happiness. All I'm saying is people are looking for that as a source of happiness. So please just clarify to the listeners here. I'm not saying social media is a source of happiness. I'm saying that's where the world is trying to find, and so we've
That's
got
right.
to be into that world and presenting the goodness, the goodness of our lives and the goodness of Jesus in their world.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I'm just thinking from the angle of like, because people are aware that actually this is making me feel bad. Like a lot of social media, like I think there is a pushback towards wanting to follow good news or
yeah,
more positive
yeah,
sources of
yeah.
whether it's even just like following a meme account that makes you laugh or something. It's like
Mm.
something that has a positive effect on you.
And I think that a lot of our people are so funny and happy. Genuinely, they're not
Yeah.
fake. They're not. In fact, people can see through fake. They don't want that. But genuine times of explosive laughter or happiness, our people are really good at that because they're joyful. Your people are some of the most joyful people in Hong Kong, and that's just such a great message. Is you can be a successful Hong Konger, and you can be joyful, and you can find friends. And hey, why don't you come and find out about Jesus as well?
Mm. Can we talk a little bit about your experience in Japan, like throughout COVID, and like how long you were online only for,
Hmm.
and maybe how your church, how people responded to the church going online, and I
Yeah,
don't know, from a leadership perspective, or
yeah, and
maybe
I
just
talk
give
about
us some
this.
context.
I talk about this a lot because it's been actually a good journey in a hard time. You don't want to go through it again. But when we hit COVID in March 2020, we couldn't meet anymore in a big meeting. And Japanese are very cautious anyway. In fact, Japanese wear masks before COVID, for allergies and just being polite. So the mask culture was never an issue here, but people were scared and would not come out and would not bring children. So we immediately knew we couldn't meet in New Testament words in the temple or the bigger meeting. So we had to move immediately to online. But the second thing we had was we had connect groups in person, and we moved all our connect groups to Zoom. So our services went to pre-recording online, and our small groups went to Zoom. So we used two different formats, but both worked amazingly for us. And I think that when we hit COVID, our small groups were at our maximum effectiveness. And I think that's really important for us to know because we didn't have to build online connect groups. We had them. We had to transfer them online from physical to online. That was the shift. But everybody did it because there was no other alternative. And then we also had to teach how to give online because there was no way for people to come and give their tithes. So we had to teach people online giving from a dead start. Like Japanese were not giving online very much to being 100%. So immediately those two formats and where our church was at, our church has actually maintained so much goodness. Yes, we've lost a few people who have left Japan. They've gone back to America or Singapore or somewhere. But the majority have stayed. Our Japanese have stayed. Our Japanese are giving online. And here's the most incredible thing: the online small groups. So the meeting from house to house concept. We moved it all to Zoom. It was an absolute success story. It was totally successful. In fact, our numbers went up and have stayed up most of this time. So when we hit COVID, we were ready for that moment. And I know a lot of churches have struggled because they didn't have their small groups established so well when it came, and they had to start from the beginning, and it's been a lot harder for them. But for Lifehouse, it is really where we've gained and kept our strength is the small groups. And I would say to anybody listening, no matter what time, pandemic, no pandemic, my advice is build small groups, build successful small groups. And I'm saying that all around the world. That the again, Paul's saying meeting in the temple and house to house. Let's build the house to house wherever it is. Could be on Zoom, could be in the park, could be in a house. The small group. I know this is not about small group today, but we probably will talk about it in the future. What makes a great small group? I got to leave that alone to say we just had it, and it was really amazing. So now coming out of COVID back to in person, the question is, do we stay? Well, in person now we have on Sunday we have an in person. Do we stay on Zoom with our small groups, or do we come back to in person as well? The answer is it's up to the group. The group will set that answer, and they're all good answers. And the other thing about what do people come back to in person or stay online? My answer is let's not stress. They love the Lord, they love the church. They're on Zoom in a small group, they're in community, we're reaching new people. Whatever people decide, they are great people and we love them. Big answer, but that was our story. 2.5 years basically without, well, 2 years without a Sunday meeting. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah,
And
amazing.
and yet the church has stayed really, really strong.
Now, you just touched on something there about whatever they decide, they're great people. So there's some thinking there.
Yeah.
There's that's intentional. So could you explain a little bit about that and how uh, why we're not trying to push people towards a certain direction, whether that's online or in person, or yeah, the thinking behind that.
I'm just so committed to seeing people grow in discipleship. I always have that. That's my key indicator. And I've seen people growing online and in person and in the house and on Zoom. And I've seen people growing in all those contexts. So I welcome those contexts. If there was a context where people go backwards, um, are in a bad place, I'd say, well, maybe that one's not working. But when all the expressions are actually working, I'd say, take your pick, take your time. You're great people. You love the Lord. As long as we're in community somehow, whether that's online, which is a messaging community, like WhatsApp, or whether it's on Zoom, or whether it's chatting online on YouTube or Facebook. As long as there's the interaction, the communication, we're having church, and people are being discipled, and people are keeping mentally pretty healthy, which is actually what we found. We found our people stayed pretty mentally strong. I mean, we've all got bad days, but really, overall, it's been pretty remarkable. Now, I know that there's a scripture that people use from Hebrews. We talked about it just before this episode about the don't hold back from meeting together. But my experience, if you ask our people, they have met together. You know, to be on WhatsApp, which is not even visual, it's just a text. A lot of our people had prayer requests, prayer answered, praise reports, more prayer. I'm doing this, life change, and you could see. Well, I couldn't see everyone's line group, but I saw a couple that there was so much life happening on line or WhatsApp, and then on Zoom. I'm hearing about people, life change, new jobs, sharing, praying, Bible. What I saw was in every bit of technology, people were being discipled, people were happy, and even people getting saved. So I think my answer when people say you got to meet together, I'm saying, well, hang on, you all through history that hasn't been possible. In China in the 1950s, people were being killed for their faith, and even now it's a little difficult. But um, why can't we just meet on a chat room and talk about Jesus and share a scripture? So context to me says, yeah. If in a perfect world, it'd be great to all meet together physically, but this world is not a perfect world, especially now with the new crisis with both COVID and Ukraine, and it's not a perfect world. We shouldn't be promising people that. It's wrong to say this is your best life ever when so much of the world are having a hard life. I think we should say, let's believe God to be our source in whatever circumstance we find ourselves, and in that case, we find church. So I would kick back against people saying you've got to meet physically because that's just not our experience. It never has been. In Japan, we've had to meet people on the phone even before the internet was great. We had to talk to people on the phone. We had to meet people at the train station. It's just our context. So wherever there's discipleship and growth and great mental health with Jesus, people meet. That's church to me.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that verse that talks about don't neglect meeting together. It's to me, it's like the language that the world uses is that this is a Zoom meeting.
Yeah,
It's it is a meeting,
yeah,
and so we are fulfilling that. And if you can
mm,
shop online, you can have a business online, you can make money online, you can spend it, you can have an online relationship, you can do everything online, but
yeah.
then to say that it's a not a legitimate meeting just in the church context to me is just inconsistent with uh, what even how just the world is using this technology and how we refer to it.
I think it's really a big word, myopic, which means one-eyed. Like this is my experience, so this is what that verse means. But again, let me say, our world is so big, Richard. You're dealing with people in coming out of China and Taiwan and Bali and other places, and every context is so different that many places where we meet, you can't meet on a Sunday. In fact, every Islamic country of the world, you're actually going to be meeting as a church on a Friday. So it's not even a Saturday or a Sunday. So context has pushed the local church to hold its values and its relationship with Jesus, but look extremely different in its context. And I think we need to celebrate that, and we need to help people understand that, and and not be myopic that this is the only way that we meet. If people enjoy meeting on a Sunday, I think that's great. I wouldn't want to speak to them anything else, but they also shouldn't speak to other parts of the world where they have no understanding and say our way is the only way. I think that's myopic is the word. It's just looking at it through one eye.
Mm.
Mm,
Yeah, and it seems like what you're saying is it's working.
yeah.
People are growing. People are
Yep.
getting so. So can you speak to a bit of that in terms of people getting
Yeah.
saved,
Yeah.
growing and becoming leaders, serving?
Sure. Yeah. Just last Sunday, I was in one of our churches here in the beautiful city of Sendai, and we had in person. We only had a few since the end of COVID, or the sort of end of COVID, and but we also had a camera with Zoom. So that was a hybrid right there in the room. It wasn't even our online program. Here was a live stream to a number of people in that area who want to link relationally. So that's a different thing. But the people listening online was a girl's mum and dad. For the very first time, it was Father's Day, and her dad promised to watch the service online. His first touch of Christianity, isn't that great? Or Jesus. And he said afterwards to her, and I think this is a really good statement. He said, "You have good friends and you have good people around you." Now, people might say, "Well, didn't that miss the point?" No, no, no. This is the first touch. And we often see in Japan that first touch is a really good touch, whether they come to see their daughter or son at a wedding ceremony or with some friends or a baby dedication. The comment often is, "You have really good people around you." And it's like their hearts are building trust to our message. Now, at the same time, this same young lady in the church had her non Christian boyfriend in church for the very first time. And so he's in the room and he's not understanding, but he's enjoying the service. And afterwards, we talked to him and he said, "I'm finding it hard to understand. I want to understand it. I want to understand my girlfriend." And like, he's a really nice guy. And he said, "But I'm committed to learning, so I'm coming next week." So even in that one room, we had, fully devoted followers of Jesus. We had some new Christians. We had a non-Christian. We had online. Wow, isn't that New Testament? And I think it's so exciting. Um, and also, I heard here in Tokyo was a girl that had contacted our church about a month ago. A Japanese girl, never been to church, never had a Christian friend, and she stumbled on our recorded online service, our scheduled services that we have in English, bilingual, and Japanese. And no, and all of a sudden she said, "I was glued to the screen." Now she used a Japanese word which said it was absolutely wonderful, steki, which means really, she was magnetized to our online, and she kept watching and watching. And she said, "I've been watching 6 months. I have no Christian friends, and I'm scared to come to church. What do I do?" And our pastor contacted her because we had her email now and said, "Please come, and we'll give you a QR code, and you can come and we'll just get to know you." And she didn't come for 2 weeks. Last Sunday she came. Her first understanding, she came and left very quickly. Um, I'm sure she's going to get saved, but there's no way we could have reached a girl like that except for online. So I'm trying to say we've got all these expressions, and every one of them is bringing fruit. At the same time, our mature and secure Christians are sharing the Bible, sharing prayer requests, sharing praise reports, sharing their lives together. So the strongest ones are also going forward. So you've got the strong ones to the very non Christians, and you see movement towards Christ, which I call discipleship. It's happening everywhere. What about you, mate? What do you want to share? A couple of stories from Hong Kong before we close?
Yeah, I mean, I think here I would call it living room outreach. It's like basically one of our young people puts on the TV on a Sunday morning in their living room, and dad's sitting in his massage chair or whatever, and he's watching just by default by being in the room. and having the same kind of comments like, "Oh,
Great.
this is a good church," or "These are good people." There's a
Yeah.
little bit more understanding of church here, maybe than in
Yeah.
Japan,
Yeah.
um, and I'd say it's a very fresh uh, like perspective of church, the
Yeah.
way that we're currently doing it and the way that we do it online. And yeah, so we're reaching into people's homes, and the family unit is it's strong here.
Yeah.
In Chinese culture, family is a big deal, and so we're just seeing more families come to church because
Mm.
uh, they've they've been seeing us online because of one person who's part of our church
Yeah.
playing that in their living room
Wow.
TV. And so we've been telling our people, like, don't just watch it on your phone. If you're at home, like, phone's cool, but there's nothing wrong with that. But if you can put it on your TV in your living room, that that's going to be outreach to your whole family. So yeah, and so just like you said, it builds trust, and then at a later date, people can actually connect them into church more so, either through maybe a connect group or coming actually in person. And that's the other thing, is that the online experience also builds the in-person experience, and vice versa. People are
Yeah.
discovering us online and then showing up later on in person and saying, "I've been watching you online, like, how do I start?" Like,
Mm.
basically they're coming in hot, and I just think just a wonderful. Uh,
Yeah.
it's speeding up the process.
It is. And we're finding that quite a few people who've been watching us, they come in saying, we've watched online for 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, and I've come here and I want to receive Jesus. They probably already did in their hearts, but they wanted to come and say, I'm now a believer. It's so exciting, hey? It really is. It's true. It really, we sort of, I guess we sort of almost promised it was going to happen. And I don't mean that in a like God said, but just we believe it's going to happen. We believe people are going to get saved online. Well, it has happened. And it's also happened for us online in countries like right around the world. Almost every country you can mention, we've had, well, that's too much, but tens and tens of countries right through Asia. People have got saved. And whether they came to our church or another church doesn't matter, but they found Jesus, you know, all through Saudi Arabia and Myanmar and Nepal and wherever it is. Like, please go to a local church there, but they actually had their touch from Jesus through online church.
I'm thinking of one guy who came to us, found us on a YouTube channel, had some experience with Christianity through his school, went to a Christian school, but he joined us online. And throughout this whole season, and we've really only just gone back to in-person services
Hmm.
a couple of months ago, and but he's saying he wants to be a pastor now. Like, so we've seen like a full progression throughout the
Wow.
whole COVID season,
Wow. Yeah.
of this great young guy getting connected with us and
Mm.
growing through connect groups over Zoom and all of that. So yeah, we've certainly seen fruit at all levels of the journey of faith. Um, it's been awesome, and I think one part to just uh, make sure we get it super clear for people is that we're not putting one expression of church above the other. Like, the online experience is not just a substitute. It's a valid expression of church, and by having both, we don't have these two tiers of, like, the good Christians who come in person and then the lazy ones at home. Like, that's not how we see things. It's like, here are two options, and you can interchange and design
Yeah.
church to fit your life. Like, we've got people here who do shift work, who rarely can come on a
Mm.
Sunday, and
Yeah.
who are loving doing church on demand. They can't even
Hmm.
attend online live. So they're watching later on demand, and they've chosen a
Mm.
connect group that actually fits their work schedule. So it's just opened us up to more people because we have two valid options. No one's feeling guilty for choosing one over the other, and I think that's been big.
Yeah. Yeah, as a result, we've got just happiness all through, really, haven't we? I mean, we've taken that stand that there's no first and second tier
Yep,
Christians. It's just people who are at different age and stage and
yep,
season, and we're going to validate it, and we're just going to help them in their growth towards Jesus. But I think if you ask them what church they belong to, they're going to say Lifehouse. For us, and I hope they say the same for you and your church. I'm not saying Lifehouse is the only church. In our experience, those people are really committed. They're not loose and just wandering around. They actually love the concepts of what you just said. That whatever way they can be part of church, they will.
Yeah, so it's not driving people to be more complacent. It's just actually allowing them to come in deeper, but at multiple points. Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's very exciting. We could talk a long time about this. We do have another episode
sure.
to film where we're going to get into the more practical side of this whole online and in-person and experience and how it all works together. So thanks so much for your time, Pastor Rod, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you enjoyed today's episode with Pastor Rod, why don't you subscribe on whatever platform you are listening to this, and we'll see you next time.